Good evening. So good to see you, and it's wonderful to be in person. We don't take these moments for granted, and so I have the great joy of welcoming you and opening our event this evening. So good to see you. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our annual Winifred E. Weeder Faculty Award Lecture for Meritorious Scholarship. The annual Weeder Faculty Award Lecture was established in 1975 to honor Dr. Winifred E. Weeder in the year of her retirement after she had served for 40 years as an SPU professor, 4 decades. The endowment to support the lecture was given by another SPU emeritus professor, Dr. Ross Shaw, who himself served at SPU for 31 years. There's a theme here. If you don't serve for at least 3 decades, this is remarkable. The Weeder Lecture provides a public platform from which the claims of the liberal arts in the Christian university are espoused. Each year, a faculty member is chosen by his or her peers to receive this award and to present scholarship informed by a Christian worldview. Dr. Weeder earned her doctorate in 1933 from the University of Chicago. When she joined the university, she was one of a few members of the faculty who actually had an earned doctorate, no small achievement. She quickly set out to create first a new class and then a whole department for classical languages. And over the course of 40 years, her passion for languages and literature inspired countless students. She was also interested in physical education, and she was SPU's first female coach, leading athletic programs for over a decade. I guess they didn't have many committee responsibilities back in those days. This lecture is a wonderful tribute to the importance of scholarship in the vocation of the Christian university professor, and that legacy is something that lives on at SPU today. I invite you to join me in prayer as we open this evening, and then Provost Laura Hartley will introduce tonight's speaker. Allow me to pray. Dear God in heaven, we come before you this evening, and we're grateful for the legacy of those scholars and faculty who have truly built this university and upon whose shoulders we stand. We're privileged to serve students, staff, and our colleagues in our calling as professors, and we pray, Lord, that we would continue to love you with all of our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our minds. We pray for Dr. Paulus this evening as he presents his scholarship to us. We pray that we would be inspired, challenged, stretched, and ultimately drawn to you. We commit this evening to your care. We ask in Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Dr. Provost Hartley, Laura Hartley.
So good evening. Let me add my welcome to you all. I get to play Radine tonight since she is on sabbatical. I'm not quite as enthusiastic as she is. But it is wonderful to have you all joining us this evening, whether here in the room or online. We're grateful that you've chosen to spend your evening with us. Before we get to the introduction of our speaker, I would like to say a number of words of thank you, most especially to Lucy Israel, who's out in the lobby there, who is the office coordinator for the Faculty Life Office, and in Radine's absence pulled this whole thing together herself. So thank you, Lucy, as well as University Communications, ETM, CIS, and Sodexo, all of whom who had parts in making tonight possible. Also, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Seattle Pacific University is named for a city that takes its name from Chief Seattle, the chief of the Duwamish people, whose territory and traditional lands stretched across our campus. We respectfully acknowledge with gratitude that we are gathering today on the lands, both ceded and unceded, of the Coast Salish peoples, the land which touches the shared water of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations, people who are still here today. I am very honored to introduce our second 2022 Weeder Lecture, where, as Michael said, we're sort of catching up and maybe caught up with his lecture this evening. So Dr. Michael Paulus is Assistant Provost for Educational Technology and also Dean of our library. Michael Paulus earned his bachelor's degree in business at the University of Washington, spent the first few years of his career working in financial technology, which included auditing information systems to ensure that they could handle the year 2000, Y2K. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, ask your parents. After helping in a very small way to save the world from failing computer clocks, Dr. Paulus attended Princeton Theological Seminary, where he earned a Master of Divinity degree and worked on Princeton's Dead Sea Scrolls project. His work with this ancient library, along with doctoral seminars in biblical studies, led him to study libraries and book history at the Information School at Rutgers University. He earned his master's degree in library and information science, and then held leadership roles in archives, libraries, and digital initiatives, first at Princeton Theological Seminary and then Whitman College. And then he began publishing, presenting, and teaching on the history and future of books and libraries. Since coming to Seattle Pacific in 2011, his administrative, teaching, and scholarly work has focused on the intersection of theology and technology, and he completed a doctorate in technology and theology at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. In addition to leading the library and educational technologies teams at SPU, Dr. Paulus regularly teaches in the library's Information Studies minor and the School of Education's Digital Education Leadership program. Tonight, Dr. Paulus's lecture is entitled Artificial Intelligence and the Apocalyptic Imagination, the Ends of Artificial Agency. He will explore one of his favorite topics, the increasing role and power of artificial intelligence in our lives, how it is shaping the future, and how we as Christians can help navigate fears and hopes around its ushering of a new creation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Paulus.
Well, thank you, Provost Hartley, for the introduction, and Pete and Hares for your prayer for our time together tonight. Thank you to all of you for coming and joining this presentation, hopefully a little bit of a discussion at the end around AI and faith. And I also would like to express my thanks for Radine's office and Lucy especially for organizing tonight's event, making sure all the details are pulled together. If you've ever organized an event, you know it's complicated and it's a lot of work. And I have a few other acronyms to thank. From ETM, our Department of Educational Technology and Media, I'd like to thank David Silcox-Rither and his student Derek, who are helping us stream this event so we can broaden our reach and create something for the record. And I would also like to thank the Faculty Development Committee for selecting this topic for this year's Weeder lecture. I should also, in addition to ETM, I'd like to thank the other members of the library staff who have been phenomenal colleagues over the last 10 years with me and have been really great conversation partners. I'm very grateful to be able to work with them. Another acronym, the AI Faculty Research Group at SPU, is a group that was organized and met, actually thanks to former Provost Van Duzer. We were able to meet over the academic year of 2019-2020, that year. And it was a great series of conversations we had, really stimulating, interdisciplinary discussions about AI and faith. We do have a book coming out next month. There's information in your program about that if you're interested. If you're around, you'll probably hear me talk more about that, at least promoting it. And also I'd like to thank a group called AI and Faith. This was a local group. It started as a local group organized by David Brenner, who started just bringing people together, people of faith who were interested in thinking about AI, especially a lot of the ethical conversations that were happening, have been increasing since then. And that group was really instrumental for bringing those of us at SPU who were interested in this topic, and then created our own group. But that organization, AI and Faith, has led to a lot of conversations and connections and collaborations and really great projects. It's now a global nonprofit group, and it is really contributing to a lot of discussion in the space of AI and ethics. I'd also like to thank my family, some of whom are here tonight and some of whom recruited others to come tonight. I am grateful to them for many things, their support, their encouragement, and their endurance, because they get to hear me talk about this stuff a lot. Maybe tonight they'll hear it in a little bit more coherent way. And then finally, I would like to just express my gratitude for this institution, SPU, which is a really unique place in that it enables, encourages, and facilitates the kind of scholarship, Christian scholarship, that really is exemplified in the Weider lectures. Most of these are online. You can go back. If tonight's doesn't impress you, go back and look at the other ones. And it's really a phenomenal record of scholarship, and it is an honor to be able to add to that legacy. So I want to start by referring to this report that came out of a G20 interfaith working group around AI and ethics. And this just came out in December, and the group is calling for a more inclusive discussion around AI. And they are calling specifically on religious communities to participate in this discussion. I'll come back to this later in my talk, but they have one recommendation on here that kind of captures what I'm trying to do with this project. And that is about the emboldened part there. It's about creating narratives that include AI. So how do we understand AI fitting within our Christian understanding of the world? And then how do we articulate that and bring that into broader discussions around AI and ethics? And so that's my goal, the big goal. To get there, I'm going to explore 4 theses tonight with you. The first is that our entanglement with technology is ancient. From the beginning, we have been shaping technology as it has been shaping us. My second thesis is that we are living through a unique moment in history. We are interacting with information and technology in new automated ways. And these ways are changing us, and they're changing our world. Third, we have been digitally naive for too long. And it's past time for us to become digitally wiser about these technologies, to upgrade understanding of them and our practices with them. And then the fourth thesis, and this is the main argument of my talk tonight, is that the apocalyptic imagination is a resource that can help us transform how we think about AI, how we use AI, and how we might discern how AI may participate in new creation. So an overview of what I'll be talking about. Kind of 5 sections here. The first, I'll explain the terms I'm using. What do I mean by the apocalyptic imagination? What do I mean by artificial intelligence? Next, I want to provide a very high-level historical and theological exploration of our long engagement with information and technology, highlighting some of the things that we've learned and gained along the way, and what's at stake with AI as we think about our history. Next, I want to focus on the image of the city as a resource for understanding the dynamics of our technological society. And I'll continue that exploration into the next section, where I want to look at the book of Revelation and recover an apocalyptic imagination that is relevant for thinking about AI. And then I'm going to bring this all together in the final section into what I call an apocalyptic scorecard, which can be used to assess real and imagined AI. And I'll test this out on a recent book called AI 2041. And if you stick around for all that, there are cupcakes at the end. So. In his play Rossum's Universal Robots, Carol Kepek introduced the word robot to describe living and intelligent labor machines. This play begins with the hope that these mass-produced artificial beings could free people from work. This would transform all of humanity into a worldwide aristocracy and make people something even greater. This hope is not realized in the play. Spoiler alert. Freed from work, people stop being creative, even literally generative, and then the robots rebel and destroy humankind. So Kepek's robot was an apocalyptic figure of the industrial age, revealing its disturbing dynamics. Humans, Kepek complained, had become captive to the principles of mass production. But this terrible machinery must not stop, he admitted, for many depended on it, and stopping it would destroy the lives of thousands. The system must continue, even though in the process it destroys thousands and thousands of lives. A product of the human brain, he concluded, had at last escaped from the control of human hands. Now, of course, Kepek's fictional figure, the robot, became a science project pretty quickly. So the Industrial Revolution, there we go. So the Industrial Revolution automated many physical tasks. And then with the invention of the electronic digital computer in the 1940s, machines began performing more complex tasks. Since then, we have become increasingly dependent on automated information processing, and artificial intelligence in particular is now a general purpose technology, like the steam engine, electricity, and the digital computer, and it's part of our daily lives. So AI has been driving what's often called by Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, a fourth industrial revolution, which is fundamentally changing the way that we live and work. Because of the power and potential, AI inspires a range of hopes and fears. It has been described as the second coming and the apocalypse at the same time. In Artificial Intelligence, a guide for thinking humans, leading AI scientist Melanie Mitchell explains being perplexed a few years ago by the hopes and fears associated with AI. While she acknowledged that AI had made significant progress in some narrow areas, it was nowhere near having the broad general intelligence of humans. On one hand, she was startled by the optimism of some of her peers who thought general human-like AI would emerge within the next 30 years. On the other hand, she was surprised by a slew of prominent people suddenly telling us we should start worrying right now about the perils of superhuman AI. In 2014, Stephen Hawking proclaimed the development of AI, full AI, could spell the end of the human race. And Elon Musk said AI was our biggest existential threat. With it, we are summoning the demon. Bill Gates agreed with Musk and didn't understand why some people were not concerned. Now, today, robots, these are physical objects controlled by AI, are a reality. Most are mostly harmless. An automated vacuum cleaner, while disturbing or upsetting to my dog, can map and clean the floor and learn to avoid messes my dog has made. But the sensors on my vacuum cleaner convert physical details about my home into data that, when shared with the manufacturers and others, it may be used to violate my privacy or my dog's. Now, my vacuum cleaner may be considered, well, my vacuum cleaner, don't worry about my vacuum cleaner, it's not capable of determining that my dog creates too much work for it, and therefore should be eliminated to optimize its own performance. If it did, with its current technology stack, I would wager that my dog could eliminate that threat pretty quickly. Now, my vacuum cleaner can be considered intelligent in a very narrow sense. It efficiently processes data to accomplish complex tasks better than my dog and me, and it improves its performance as it acquires new data relevant to achieving its vacuuming goals. Now, things get a little bit more complicated when we consider the AI system used to control the operations of the factory that manufactures my vacuum cleaner. Now, to explain and evaluate this system, this involves discussions about data and inputs, AI models, outputs, contexts, and these contexts are business, social, and environmental, and the role of humans in this whole process. Such a complex system, which transforms what a factory is and is capable of doing, raises a number of ethical questions. Kate Crawford points out in the Atlas of AI that at a fundamental level, AI is technical and social practices, institutions and infrastructures, politics and culture. It is a massive industrial formation. We need to engage our understanding of what is underway in the empires of AI, she says, to see what is at stake and to make better collective decisions about what should come next. Now, AI agents are not only technological artifacts, but like Hepek's robots, they are apocalyptic figures of our current technological society. In this lecture, I want to explore two phenomena, a new phenomenon, artificial intelligence, and an ancient phenomenon, the apocalyptic imagination. And it aims to show how the latter may help us shape the former. Now, both of these terms have broad semantic ranges. The term artificial intelligence, which was coined in the 50s to describe the project of simulating intelligence with computers, is the origin of that term. And before then, computers already had been programmed to perform a variety of operations through automated processing. Now, computers can be programmed to program themselves. Information processing can be self-directed or autonomous. Now, what is considered AI is contested. It can be extended to any type of automated information processing, such as a calculator or a thermostat, or it can be applied to nothing, since no computational artifact matches, let alone exceeds, all of which human intelligence is capable. Today, AI is usually used to refer to self-learning predictive models, such as a machine learning system that determines the optimal way to heat a house based on observed behavior of its inhabitants. So throughout this lecture, I will use AI to refer to automated information processing by computational artifacts, broadly. The apocalyptic imagination, likewise, can be defined broadly or narrowly. In the broadest sense, an apocalypse is a revelation or an uncovering of something that is hidden. An imagination that is apocalyptic is open to such disclosures through apocalyptic texts, images, and events. More narrowly, due to the popularity of certain apocalypses that focus on the end of the world, the apocalyptic imagination often focuses on the end of life as we know it, and this is the narrow sense. In theology, the apocalyptic imagination seeks to uncover the relationships between divine and human knowledge, heaven and earth, eternity and time, and divine and human action. I'm most interested in exploring the apocalyptic imagination as an interpretation of reality that uncovers deeper dimensions of knowledge, space, time, and agency to reveal and realize a new and hopeful view of the world. AI has been connected with the apocalyptic imagination from the beginning. I'm sure you all know movies that feature AI in the end of the world. But a richer understanding of the apocalyptic imagination, such as the one found in the book of Revelation, also called the Apocalypse of John, can help us reflect on the role of AI and shape it. The philosopher Luciano Fleury collapses the third and fourth industrial revolutions into what he calls an information revolution. Following the scientific revolutions associated with Copernicus, Darwin, and Freud, information and communication technologies are shaping our sense of self and how we relate to each other and how we shape and interact with our world. Smart and autonomous agents no longer need to be human, Fleury says, and we are shaping a world that is increasingly friendly to and accommodating of these technologies, especially artificial agents. From an informational perspective, at least 3 previous major information revolutions can be identified that have shaped us throughout our history. The emergence of information attention, the creation of information agencies, and the invention of information artifacts. Each of these revolutions significantly enhanced us and also revealed new insights about us and our role in the world. These insights can help us navigate our new current revolution related to information automation. The history of human technology began some 3 million years ago, when early hominids started working with stone tools to cut food. And over time, long period of time, these newer tools and techniques begin to become more complicated, and eventually this technological development merged with natural selection to co-direct human evolution. The emergence of Homo sapiens between 200,000 and 60,000 years ago was accompanied with an explosion of artifacts, artistic works, multi-component weaponry, schedules, all of which evidenced enhanced working memory, abstract reasoning, symbolic thinking, grammatical language, and instruction. All of this marks the first major information revolution, when humans developed a new capability for information attention. With the ability to interact with information abstractly and reflectively instead of reflexively and automatically, our species was able to comprehend and communicate information, as well as disinformation and misinformation, about observed and unobserved phenomena. Reflective attention enabled humans to shape and transcend reality by imagining alternatives to it. They could anticipate and plan for the future, create stories and more complex social systems, and imagine a deeper spiritual dimension to reality. Interestingly, Yuval Harari in *Sapiens* calls this moment in human evolutionary history the tree of knowledge mutation. That, of course, comes from the Garden of Eden, where humans are permitted to eat the fruit of every tree except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Walter Brueggemann observes that human vocation in Genesis comes with both permission and prohibition. After a theological debate with a shrewd serpent who turns God into an abstraction and prohibition into a possibility, humans desiring the promise of knowledge, they take and eat the forbidden fruit and break a relationship of trust with God. The serpent's promise that their eyes will be opened and they will be like God, knowing good and evil, is fulfilled immediately. They gain knowledge of their nakedness, become afraid of God, and are expelled from the garden. The pursuit and application of knowledge now requires wisdom to discern what is true and good from what is false and bad, and to distinguish between what we can know and do from what we may know and must do. In the legend of Eden, there's this acknowledgement that human intelligence should not be autonomous. Now, a fundamental challenge we face today with information automation is the extent to which it threatens the disautomation connected with the origin of our species that resulted in our capacity for reflective attention. Attention merchants, with the help of AI, compete for our attention in ways that interfere with our ability to focus and do what we want to do. James Williams, an SPU alum, by the way, argues that this type of functional distraction can lead to an existential form of distraction if our higher goals and values are compromised and we are hindered from being who we want to be. This can lead to an even deeper form of distraction, which diminishes the cognitive capabilities that enable us to define our goals and values in the first place. A second information revolution followed the emergence of agriculture some 12,000 years ago. First, cities began to appear around the planet to provide stability, security, economies of scale, opportunities for specialization, and the creation of cultural goods. Cities also created many problems: social hierarchies and inequalities, food insecurity and disease, more impersonal relationships, and they often permanently altered physical environments. But cities became a central part of human experience and one of our favored niches. Now, complex, shared, and future-oriented goals, overcoming the limitations of individual intelligence, were realized through information agencies. The second information revolution involved political, economic, religious, and other institutions organizing laws for courts, accounting for markets, narratives for temples, and instructions for other institutions for other collaborative processes for civic life. These institutions created a structural agency that enabled cities to operate as multi-agent and semi-autonomous systems to extend collective human actions across space and time. Going back to Genesis and what happens to Cain after he kills his brother, Cain had been a worker of the earth, tiller of the ground like his father, but now he has to find a new vocation and he becomes an urban designer. And he names his first city after his son, Enoch. and both Enochs can be seen as a fulfillment of the mandate to fill and rule the earth, to procreate and create. But at the narrative nadir of Genesis, we find the story of Babel. Migrants come together to build a city, make a name for themselves, and avoid being scattered. As the Tower of Babel rises into the heavens, God confuses their language and disrupts their shared goals and agency. According to Brueggemann, this pattern repeated at Babel is of self-sufficiency and autonomy, a fortress mentality which seeks to survive by its own resources. Now, rather than a critique of cities or technology, which is the story is often read this way, the narrative of Babel, which alludes to the ancient seat of the Babylonian Empire, can be read as a critique of self-serving or perhaps even imperial autonomy. Today, Brett Frischman and even Selinger worry we are losing our agency and downgrading ourselves as we develop AI. What meaningfully distinguishes us from Homo sapiens, as Homo sapiens from all other species, is our capability to imagine, conceptualize, and engineer ourselves and our environments, they argue. But we need to be attentive to how our identities, societies, and world can be constrained, conditioned, and controlled by our own creations. The structural forms of automated agency we are capable of creating, from cities to AI, become oppressive and require regular human interventions to correct systemic flaws and failures. A third information revolution occurred some 5,000 years ago when information agencies developed written communications and information artifacts to manage the present affairs of cities and to reflect on a deep past and a far future. To provide immediate and long-term access to information artifacts and communicate across generations, information and attention management systems such as libraries joined other urban institutions by the second millennium BCE. Libraries functioned to represent a particular culture through the selection of certain texts that it judged worthy of attention, and then to mediate access to these texts through social and technological systems. By preserving memories of the past, anticipations of the future, and adding to these through the creation of new knowledge in the present, libraries became a technology for knowledge augmentation. As knowledge was being augmented increasingly through information artifacts during the last few centuries before the Common Era, new religious and philosophical approaches to wisdom emerged throughout the ancient world. John Hott says, what was occurring during this period and continues now was the birth of a new sense of rightness, sharper distinctions than ever before between a right way and a wrong way to live, think, act, work, and pray. Hott describes these approaches as anticipatory, seeking redemption, redemptive rightness, and revelatory fullness by expectancy. The view of this view of the future is not just informed by the past and the actual, but also by promise and possibility. Between the 8th and 2nd centuries BCE, the apocalyptic imagination emerged in Jewish prophecy as a way of exploring how rightness could be realized when so much was wrong in the present. Adele Yarbo Collins argues that Jewish apocalyptic thinking became the primary source of the narratives and symbolic systems that inspired John the Baptist, Jesus, the earliest community after Easter, and Paul. The resurrection of Jesus was understood as an apocalyptic event which began the hoped-for transformation of the world. Now, apocalyptic literature is a scribal phenomenon, and textual artifacts often appear in narratives to facilitate the uncovering of information. In the Apocalypse, John is directed to write in a scroll what he sees, and he has many scrolls and sees many scrolls in his visions. The conclusion of the Gospel of John declares that information artifacts participate in God's apocalyptic augmentation of knowledge. One ending says, "These signs are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God." The other ending, echoing Ecclesiastes' statement that there is no end to the making of many books, acknowledges the importance of selection. Eugene Peterson's translation of this ending reads, There are many other things Jesus did. If they were all written down, each of them, one by one, I can't imagine a world big enough to hold such a library of books. In the centuries that followed, the creation of books, libraries, and schools for knowledge augmentation became an important focus for Christians. One of the great challenges of our time now is how our society continues to augment knowledge and grow in wisdom as social and technical environment, in a social and technological environment that can amplify and automate deception and distraction. All right, so hope and longing in Las Vegas. The city is one of the most important innovations of our species, and it is an important image for understanding the history and future of our technological society. Las Vegas, an aggressively modern city profoundly shaped by technology, presents itself with an otherworldliness that can be described as apocalyptic. Visitors find themselves enclosed in large labyrinthine spaces that ignore diurnal rhythms, and they are engulfed in a new role for the benefit of the house. Las Vegas has a lot to say and reveal about the dynamics of our technological society, and it is an ideal place for holding an AI visioning event, which is what Amazon did in 2019. In 2011, Jeff Bezos pressed his team to push the boundaries of established technology and create a device with its brain in the cloud, completely controlled by voice. After the release of Echo and Alexa in 2014, Amazon quickly became one of the most significant developers of AI. In an announcement for the first public event on machine learning, automation, robotics, and space in 2019, called REMARS, Bezos claimed, "We are at the beginning of a golden age of AI. Recent advancements have already led to invention that previously lived in the realm of science fiction. And we've only scratched the surface of what's possible." In one keynote, a senior Amazon executive claimed, we are only in the beginning stages of truly understanding the potential of AI to change our lives and to help us work on some of the most important and urgent problems that humanity faces. I believe AI will continue to transform our lives for the better. It holds the promise of conquering the most daunting challenges, like exploring space or curing cancer. The program at REMARS included product sessions and workshops, tech demonstrations, parties with gambling and BattleBots, and a fireside chat with Bezos. And during this chat, Bezos talked about the importance of making big bets in business and how Alexa was inspired by the Star Trek computer. Now, the AI technologies exhibited and showcased at REMARS, recommendation and fulfillment systems, warehouse robots and delivery drones, and Alexa's latest abilities to anticipate customer inquiries, reveal that AI is indeed enabling a new way of life. One Amazon employee at the event said, "It makes you dream for the future and just gets you so excited to see where the world is going." It's hard to be an optimist sometimes. Because of its massive wealth, scale, and impact before COVID, Amazon had become, in Brad Stone's words, a referendum on society and on the responsibilities that large companies have toward their employees, their communities, the sanctity of our fragile planet. Increasingly, Amazon was being criticized for its asymmetrical influences over markets, employees, and customers, a criticism that intensified during the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, REMARS 2020 was canceled, and dreams about AI solving future problems, especially the 2019 dreams about solving future problems were largely displaced. Amazon became focused on unprecedented demand for online purchasing, scaling up physical infrastructure to fulfill that demand, and nearly doubling its human workforce to do what could not be done with machine learning, automation, and robots. Like many organizations, Amazon attempted to find technological solutions, especially with AI, to respond to the pandemic. Although some significant technologies and technological solutions were found, AI does not seem to have been the most important pandemic technology. Indeed, it may be remembered as one of the most abused technologies during the pandemic. For example, Amazon's success in AI did not include its systems for mass managing people. From hiring through firing, Amazon's maze of systems that maximized efficiency and minimized human contact were uneven and strained even before the pandemic. According to a 2021 New York Times expose, these systems burned through workers, resulted in inadvertent firings, and stalled benefits, and impeded communication. Now, Amazon set a new earnings record in 2020, and Bezos stepped down from his role as CEO to pursue other bets. The day after he flew into space, the 2021 Alexa Live Virtual Developers Conference highlighted the increased use and development of Alexa during the pandemic, especially in homes, the automation of which is Amazon's next big bet. Presenting from Amazon Spheres in downtown Seattle, emptied by the pandemic, executives shared their vision for making Alexa a natural part of our lives. Now, as we engage with the digital dimension of these AI factories, these AI-augmented factories in our homes and workplaces, which of course are merging or linked through digitally enabled labor, AI is guiding the organization of machine cities, such as at Amazon warehouses. These systems are also shaping the world beyond them. As we watch our homes and cities transformed into a new Eden optimized by and for AI, where do humans fit within and or outside the loops of inputs and outputs? One of the severest critics of the technological city, Jacques Ellul, provides some helpful insights for reflecting on our current structural gambles. In the 1940s, Ellul started working on two books. The first, a sociological analysis of the modern technological civilization, was published in French in 1954 as Technique, or the Wager of the Century. It appeared in English in 1964 as the Technological Society. The second book, An Exegesis of the City and the Bible, was published in English in 1970 as The Meaning of the City, and a French version appeared in 1975. Ellul explained that the two books were composed in counterpoint. To my book on technology corresponds my theologically based study of the great city as the supreme achievement of human technology. In the Technological Society, in the first book, Ellul focuses on much more than modern technologies. He focuses on technology's technique, that is, the totality of methods rationally arrived at and of having absolute efficiency. Ellul describes how humanity made a wager on technology in the 20th century and concludes that technology had won the bet and proceeded to beat the house. Ellul argues that the modern technological society has evolved into an autonomous force that pursues its own course more and more independently of humans. He says humans participate less and less actively in technical creation, which by automatic combination of prior elements becomes a kind of fate. People resemble tokens inserted into a slot machine. They start the operation without participating in it. Ellul claims it is vanity to pretend that technology can be checked or guided. We have become enclosed within our artificial creations. Now, rather than getting rid of technology, he says, we must find a way to transcend its monolithic power. And Ellul suggests three possible disturbing phenomena: war, collective revolt, and divine intervention. But in the end, he appeals to individual responsibility and resistance. Now, in The Meaning of the City, the second book, Ellul explores divine intervention as the necessary disruption. The meaning of the city, according to Ellul, is that it is a curse, and only God can correct it. Ellul sees Cain's establishment of this first city as an act of rebellion against God, a counter-creation that breaks with the divine nature of creation. Worse, in creating the city, humans create an autonomous power that is something greater than us. A city becomes an autonomous system with its own objective: control, certainty, closure, and commodification. The diabolical human city, Ellul concludes, cannot be reformed. or redeemed. It must be replaced by God at the end of time. The New Jerusalem that Elul sees at the end of the Apocalypse is a rejection of human artifacts and artificial agency. The judgment of the final human city, the judgment against the final human city, Babylon in the Apocalypse, is a double condemnation of all cities, past and present, which are not in contact with New Jerusalem. New creation, which is absolutely new, comes only through the judgment and destruction, he says. There is no continuity. New Jerusalem is not a work of our hands. Again, that's Elul. Now, Elul provides a helpful diagnosis of the power and dynamics of autonomous systems. But his apocalyptic imagination sees little present hope for the human city and the technological society. But there is another way of reading the apocalypse, which finds an affirmation of the city that transforms every human city into a medium of new creation. So now let's turn our attention to the apocalypse. Recent biblical scholarship on the apocalyptic imagination focuses on its historical development within Jewish prophecy. According to Anethea Porter Young, the Jewish apocalyptic imagination took shape within imperial contexts. Apocalypses functioned to orient a terrorized people to a vision of a future ordered by divine justice. Apocalyptic visions asserted the transience and finitude of temporal powers, articulated a counter-discourse to the discourse of empire, and empowered resistant action. N.T. Wright argues that the earliest church's testimony to Jesus' resurrection reframed apocalyptic expectations. Jesus' rising was interpreted simultaneously as a very strange event within the present world and as the foundational and paradigmatic event within God's new creation. In Jesus, the hope for apocalyptic transformation had been inaugurated. The Christian apocalyptic imagination, apprehending the real world in its new mode, Wright says, opens up a vision of new creation, which precisely overlaps with and radically transforms the present creation. The function of the apocalypse of John is to uncover and reveal the integrated and interlocking nature of divine and human knowledge, space, time, and agency. The Apocalypse is a circular letter addressed to 7 first-century churches in Roman Asia Minor. In the first part of the book, letters to the 7 churches commend those doing good works in their cities, console those suffering for good works in hostile cities, critiques those complicit with evil powers, and chastises the complacent whose works are worthless. John then shares a series of visions unveiling God's transformative work in the world and God's sovereignty. Throughout John's dynamic narrative, there's an intensifying tension between what ought to be and what is, until the evil city Babylon falls and the good city of God, New Jerusalem, is established. Now, it's important to say, as violent as the imagery in these visions is, David de Silva emphasizes the important points that from the beginning to end, John encourages only nonviolent protest and resistance on the part of his Christian audiences. Now, while some attempt to read the Apocalypse as a simple, straightforward sequence of events, Babylon falls and New Jerusalem arrives, De Silva points out that there are indicators that the movement of the plot is not entirely linear. John announces the descending of New Jerusalem before it is fully revealed, and Babylon's fall is declared before it is witnessed. These and other elements in the narrative support a reading of the Apocalypse that sees both cities present in the historical cities named and addressed in the book. Before the ultimate destinies of the falling Babylon and the arriving New Jerusalem are realized in the narrative, these 2 cities are revealed as central figures in a spiritual topography encompassing all cities. Now, Babylon is Rome, the great city that rules over the rulers of the earth. The Roman Empire targeted cities as useful tools to advance core imperial activities, policing to manage internal competition, and economic extraction to fund warfare and policing. In the cities of the empire, architecture and artifacts asserted the glories of Roman prosperity, peace, and power. But John presents an alternative narrative about Rome. He reveals the inequities and injustices of Rome's prosperity, which exploited and enslaved many. The peace of the Roman Empire involved systematically killing people to secure territories, stabilize economies, and eliminate those who impeded imperial ends. Thus, John says Rome was inebriated with the blood of the dead. And Rome's belief in its eternal destiny will be proven false. It is doomed to fail for its denial of what truly sustains life. John's images and indictments of economic exploitation, political violence, and ideological hubris uncover the lies or sorcery by which all nations were deceived. When Babylon fully falls, its end is celebrated for its injustices and its deceptions that convinced many that such evils were good are condemned and come to an absolute end. The destruction of Babylon is also lamented, not only by those who benefited from the excesses of empire, but also over the loss of cultural activities and artifacts that filled daily life. Musicians playing instruments, artisans of every technical trade working with tools, millers grinding grain, and people celebrating marriages. Good things entangled in the collapsing imperial system, which will need a new city. The apocalypse culminates with the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from the new heaven to the new earth. This final city, from and filled with the glory of God, is constructed out of earthly materials and surpasses the glory of every human city. The rulers of the earth and the people from all nations, drawn by the light of Christ, bring into New Jerusalem the glory and honor of the nations. Now, since technical trades and their technologies were an essential feature of ancient cities, as they are present cities, it is easy to imagine how some technology may be included among these gifts and goods. From the throne of God, which is now relocated from heaven to earth, flows the river of the water of life. The river runs through the middle of the city street, feeding the tree of life, the leaves of which are for the healing of the nations. In this new, improved urban Eden, God and nature fill the built city with beauty, life, and healing. Divine, natural, human, and even artificial agency have been reconciled and given a new, coherent dynamism. Brian Blunt emphasizes the concrete realism of John's vision of New Jerusalem as a tangible, measurable, objective city. The life envisioned in this urban environment includes diverse people and vocations, interdependent and collaborative relationships, and cultural artifacts and activities that constitute the dynamics of civic life. The previously ambiguous image of the city is not annihilated, but rather amplified. It continues transformed and is the central place of dwelling with God. When John first sees New Jerusalem in the Apocalypse, Christ declares, "Behold, I am making all things new." While the statement primarily refers to the full and final transformation of reality, commentators point out that the present tense suggests God is continually making things new here and now. The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. I look forward to singing that on Sunday. And there is another urban network permeating Rome's. John's hearers are part of and participants in the new creation, the holy city in which God is ruling, says Eugene Peterson. Images of New Jerusalem are a means for discovering the real city in present cities. The Apocalypse reveals the city is part of, every city is part of God's good creation and is the locus of God's grand recreation. God is taking what is old and transforming it, Blunt says. The old will remain a constituent part of the new. The overall message of the Apocalypse to the churches is to turn their attention and redirect their agency away from the diabolical and doomed Babylon and toward the present reality and manifestation of New Jerusalem. Along with this apocalyptic adjustment to readers' perceptions of reality, the Apocalypse presents some criteria for discerning and doing what is good and right. De Silva says God's people must discern what is Babylonish about the domination system in the midst of which they live and of which they may themselves be part. Faithful witnesses also should form a vision for and desire a better future, a more just future. and perform works of love, faith, service, and patient endurance that participate in transformation. Every city is a technology and depends on increasingly complex technologies. Some of these should and will be condemned for their deformative roles in patterns of Babylonian counter-creation. Others, participating in the life of the new city, are transformative and may be among the glory and honor of the nations that find a permanent place in New Jerusalem. If our technologies, including our newest examples or complex artifacts, such as autonomous artificial agents, may not be condemned as agents of counter-creation, they may be glorified as agents of new creation. So in this final section, I want to bring all this together and put this into what I'm calling an apocalyptic scorecard for assessing AI. Coming back to the G20 Interfaith Working Group report I mentioned earlier, this calls for a more global, inclusive approach to AI governance and emphasizes that established cultural values, often reflected in or emerging from religious practices, can guide policies so that AI develops as a tool that assists and augments human capability. And it calls specifically on religious organizations to participate in this by providing access to shared ethical injunctions. As we consider how AI may augment our lives, the apocalypse can help with technological discernment in at least three ways. First, it can affirm an ethical minimum for assessing the impacts of actual and imagined technologies. Second, the apocalypse points to strategies for resisting and reforming unjust systems and technologies. Third, and most important, for inspiring and sustaining ethical reflection and strategic interventions, the ultimate city of the apocalypse can help us imagine a better world that is not only a future promise, but an emerging present reality. The shared apocalyptic ethical commitments and strategies for a better and juster world may be found in many contemporary technological critiques and forms of activism. For example, in Race After Technology, Ruha Benjamin reveals forms of coded inequity that too often reinforce racism and other forms of inequity. These include chatbots that recycle derogatory language, racialized zip codes, exposing groups to systems of racial surveillance, and seeking technological solutions for inequities without considering the social structures that perpetuate these. Benjamin urges, we cannot resign ourselves to this reality we have inherited. It is time to reimagine what is possible. Another example may be found in Wayne Yang's analysis of how universities cultivate in learners structural agency, which may be used to reassemble colonial technologies to realize alternative futures. Focusing on Indigenous and Black histories, Yang describes how technological ends may be interrupted and redirected for a better world. In the apocalypse, questions about what we may hope, what we can know, and what we should do become the question of participating in the reality revealed in New Jerusalem. The shared telos apprehends our attention, augments our knowledge, and structures our agency. Yana Bennett points out that the biblical narrative, to which the apocalypse is the canonical conclusion, of course, is a corrective or counter-narrative that enables us to critique and live with technology in a way that makes it work for God's purposes. To remain aligned with this narrative, Christians engage in formative practices, such as corporate worship and instruction, and individual prayer and service, all of which cultivate hope, faith, and love. The insights, values, and cautions from the history of information revolutions and the apocalypse can be drawn together to create something like an apocalyptic scorecard for assessing real and imagined AI. Following an integral futures approach, the following questions may be asked of AI systems. What ultimate hopes and goals are identified in these? Are these sufficiently critical, diverse, and participatory? Does the AI ecosystem provide the conditions for cultivating constant critical reflection and refinement of goals? Second, what advantages of collective action are used to realize shared goals? Are the AI structures and systems created to support these ends? continuously curated to ensure that they enhance rather than inhibit human agency. Are people growing in knowledge and seeking greater wisdom? And do AI systems support this growth? Do the AI systems advance political, economic, and social justice and peace? What formative practices accompany AI systems to shape individual and collective attention and agency with, against, and beyond these systems? When AI systems do fail, how may they be rejected, reformed, or revisited, or resisted? So let me apply this to a recent book, AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future. In this book, scientific forecasting and speculative fiction come together to imagine a realistic and hopeful future with AI. In collaboration with AI expert Kai-Fu Lee, the science fiction writer Chen Chun-fan tells 10 stories about AI in 2041. At the end of the book, Lee concludes that AI will open the door to a radiant future for humanity. AI will create unbelievable wealth, amplify our capabilities through human-AI symbiosis, improve how we work, play, and communicate, and usher in an age of plenitude. This is the summary of the stories. At the same time, he acknowledges AI will bring about myriad challenges and perils. But in each story, Lee claims, our sense of justice, our capacity to learn, our audacity to dream, and our faith in human agency always save the day. Now, this is a very good book, don't get me wrong. I recommend it. It's great on technology. It's great stories. But my apocalyptic scorecard raises some questions about Lee's optimism. And I want to focus on 3 areas of concern: reflective attention, structural agency, and knowledge augmentation. Reflective attention, when present in the stories, is individualistic and not cultivated in communities. The role of AI mostly is one of intellectual and spiritual interference, distracting one character from pursuing a relationship with someone whom an insurance app has determined is a risky prospect based on biased data, and trapping another character in another story in a world of deep fakes that deceive and complicate the person's life. Now, without the cultivation of reflective attention, I mean, all the human qualities that these stories seek to lift up and are valued in the book seem threatened by a re-automization of humans and the loss of what we gained through the loss of Eden and the hope of transformation. The stories in AI 2041 show more and more responsibilities and agency being outsourced to AI, severing people from more direct engagement with others and the world. As more work is automated, people struggle to find meaning and dignity. Lee hopes for an AI-led renaissance, since AI will liberate us from routine work, give us an opportunity to follow our hearts, and push us into thinking more deeply about what really makes us human. But even in the stories that explore how AI can help people move up Maslow's hierarchy or provide everyone with an equal opportunity to explore who they are and what they want to become and help them fully realize their potential, there are no shared structures or spaces for ethical analysis, forethought, or formation. And Lee acknowledges radical change would require improbable shifts from corporations, an unlikely cooperation of nations, and an implausible forfeiture of the never-ending human vices of greed and vanity. Also, there's the problem of war, which remains in the stories, and is the topic of the most apocalyptic story in the book, about a mad scientist who uses autonomous weapons to destroy human civilization. So we seem to be back at Babel. Now, there are no libraries in AI 2041, which to me reveals the information is not intentionally curated through any knowledge infrastructures. Old printed books only become important when the digital society collapses, and education seems concerned mostly about acquiring skills for whatever jobs remain. In a story about 2 alienated twins, one brother says, AI has shaped us and we have shaped AI, but we are like 2 frogs who have each built a well, each seeing only a small piece of the sky. Perhaps if we connect our wells, we will see a bigger world. And they do, by connecting their perspectives and their personal AIs, their previous lives then open up to new possibilities. As in other stories, shared intellectual and cultural resources available to shape a better future with AI, especially through the augmentation of knowledge by bringing more wells together, if you will, are not clearly identified. In a world full of pseudo-information, we really risk civilizational regress if we do not attend to the continual collective pursuit of wisdom. We do see the power of human agency in these stories, but it is not clear how it will save the day, with key elements missing from my apocalyptic scorecard. As Shannon Valor pointed out a number of years ago, in Technology and the Virtues, there's a widening cultural gap between the scope of our global techno-social power and the depth of our techno-moral wisdom. To address this, she called for convening new institutions, communities, and cultural alliances in the service of global techno-moral cultivation. A number of new and such institutions have emerged since. AI and Faith is a good example. And we can call and hope for more to help us develop AI that advances political, economic, and social justice and peace, as well as formative practices to shape individuals and to shape us collectively in our attention and agency with and beyond AI. In our memories of the past, anticipations of the future, and perceptions of the present, we are entangled with technology. We continue to shape it as it shapes us. When this goes well, technologies change and augment us. When it does not go well, technological change is more like an amputation. Our current interactions with automated and autonomous systems mark a unique period of profound and transformative change for us and our world. We have been digitally naive about this for too long and the dynamics of how this works, and we need to upgrade our understanding and our use of transformative technologies such as AI. As we begin to imagine new futures, critiquing the not this of the our present reality and seeking the not yet of our desired futures, the apocalyptic imagination presented in the Apocalypse of John is a generative resource capable of transforming how we think about and use AI. And it can enable us to discern ways artificial agency may participate in new creation. As John Wyatt says in The Robot Will Save You, the robot will see you now, not save yet, we face a unique opportunity for creative thought and engagement as a Christian community in the strange new world in which we find ourselves. It is my hope that this lecture has highlighted some resources worthy of further creative thought and engagement. Thank you again for coming tonight and for your attention.
Sorry, if I could start us off. Thank you first. That was really interesting. Something that I think about on a regular basis, surprisingly. Yesterday on my Twitter feed, I was treated to a driverless taxi cab in San Francisco. Many of you may have seen this. And then that driverless taxi cab was pulled over by the police officer because its lights were off. And then halfway during the stop, and this is what Twitter was all excited about, it drove up and parked over on the side of the road, out of traffic, out of the intersection, which led me to think about sort of the question you ask at the end, can AI save us? And that would be, how would you envision AI helping us to become better, fighting injustice in the ways that you've talked about?
Well, that's a big question. I think there are a lot of experiments going on right now well, let me back up. So right now, AI is largely used to kind of nudge us to, purchase things, to, stay on sites, to engage with certain things, for profit. So you could think about those technologies being something more transparent to us and something that we could then direct to sort of encourage certain behaviors or sort of make us aware of, what we're doing or what we're not doing. I mean, one interesting thing over the last few years has been, circa 2016, when there was this flip from people being much more utopian about technology, being much more dystopian about technology, you saw a lot of movements to try to focus on human-centered technology. And so, a lot more tools started popping up, like, if you have an Apple phone, it sort of gives you these reports of how you're, it's making transparent to you how you're using your time. So I think there's a lot of ways that AI can be used to present us with data that helps us make informed decisions. The trick is that, we want to set the goals, and we want to understand, how the technology can be aligned to meet the goals that we value, that we care about.
So kind of following on that line of thought, how do we balance the line between AI imitating human behavior and decision making versus like correcting it and creating that new path as you talked about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a certain argument, school of kind of critical of AI that says, the first thing is let's not try to mimic humans with AI. Let's figure out what AI does well and use AI for that, and then try to figure out what the right kind of partnership is with AI. AI is efficient; it can discover patterns that we cannot. At the same time, there's insights and creativity, and other things that we can do that are unique to humans. And so, trying to figure out where the right partnership is, I think, is the key.
I wondered if you'd thought about the role of AI in fundamentally changing a university. We've been in the past trying to figure out how to pass on knowledge, pass on facts to people, a lot of knowledge, interest.
Yeah.
What do you do with that stuff, and what does it mean, and how do you test it?
Yeah.
And it seems to me like the transformation you talked about suggests a very different role for the university.
I would agree. It's actually, this was a discussion we had in class today, talking about the AI, should AI replace teachers? That was the question. And, the short answer is no. But a better answer is, there are certain things in education that probably, could be made more efficient, using AI tutors, for example, if it's a sort of a quizzing, testing, or something like that. Whereas there's a lot that happens in teaching that's just not very efficient, and you can't really optimize AI for that. The context is, the context is important because most of our educational systems to this day are still structured on kind of an industrial model of sort of mass producing, put people at the same age in the same class, give them the same content, a certain number of hours, they move up, they get credits, they get degrees, and so forth. And so, this is an industrial model that was very effective to a certain extent for quite some time during the early 20th century. But as technology started changing and jobs started changing in the 70s and later, this model stopped being aligned with the economy. And so there were interesting experiments during the latter half of the 20th century, but a lot of those experiments didn't sort of become mainstream. And so we are still at a period where we're really needing to adapt our educational models to kind of the dynamics of our technological society. And I do think there are ways that we could use AI in that, and I do think there are ways that we could optimize, wrong word, humans, in that process, that we can have the more meaningful kind of formation that happens that parallels what we can do with the technology in terms of, maybe gaining certain skills or learning certain skills. But it's a huge question, and it's a very good one. Yeah, Margaret.
Thanks, Michael, for that talk. I learned so much. A lot of what you're ascribing to the apocalyptic imagination sounds to me simply like the wise and morally informed imagination. So I'm wondering what it is about the apocalypse that you find so congenial to the message that you're trying to convey, and is it because people tell these apocalyptic stories about AI? I mean, is that part of what's sort of motivating you to draw on that particular resource to describe the imagination you think we need?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. The first hook for me was that, people like to tell apocalyptic stories about AI. I mean, that is kind of what we've been doing from the beginning, going back to RUR, all the way up through the Matrix franchise. This is, we tend to want to use these categories because it involves the future, and it involves some kind of disruption. So one of the things I think that does is it creates an opportunity for us to redefine the apocalyptic imagination and say, there's a much richer, resource here, imaginative resource for thinking about, ultimate ends, for thinking about the future, for thinking about, humans being future directed and sort of drawn into the future. And there's a lot, I can only kind of touch on it by just giving you a survey of the Apocalypse of John, but there's a lot more that could be said about how what's unique about the Christian apocalyptic imagination can be brought into conversation with other kind of apocalyptic versions of AI that I think are redemptive but also transformative. Does that help? Okay. Thank you. Gives me a chance to summarize like that. Yeah.
I thought you did a really good job about focusing on this problem that we've talked about for a long time, which is what we can do versus what we should do in artificial intelligence. And I think you provide a really neat way of looking at what we should do. My question would be that in development of AI and these newer technologies, a lot of times we don't anticipate what they're going to do. And so it can be easy to answer the question of whether something is ethical in its initial version, but as these things grow and have these different offshoots, they might be used for totally different purposes, and some of these might be very negative, and some of them might just be different. How would you suggest we approach ethics in developing something that can change so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it is a wicked challenge in that, I mean, I guess the first thing is to broaden the technological imagination, so that you start thinking like, what are the possible applications, uses, and abuses of this technology, and that requires a pretty robust understanding of how technology works in the wild, how it works with the realistic view of humans. What we are and what we aren't and what we're capable of doing. So I think cultivating, and there's a lot of good work that's being done in this area. I mean, there's a number of initiatives that are focusing on AI narratives and trying to help people think about new technologies imaginatively. So that's a good exercise. There are a lot of principles. There are a lot of frameworks for auditing. I think constant. Constant attention to, and one of the points I made is that it's a sort of a constant curation and reflection and reassessment of the technologies as they are, because we're doing this stuff in the wild now. That up until the computing power that we've gained over the last 20 years and the access to data, a lot of this stuff was just, these were academic experiences, on kind of, university computers. Now the stuff's in the wild. And so, so I think we just have to be very engaged at multiple levels with broad stakeholders, diverse perspectives, and just be vigilant about sort of tracking this stuff. And being willing to say no, we're not this. We don't want to go down this path, or we need to slow this path down, or we need to kind of reassess what we've done. But I mean, it's a huge question. It is the question. But I think my small bit on my small contribution to that I hope would be cultivating an imagination that really kind of has a very realistic and robust view of humans in our history and our potential.
Thank you, Michael, for that intriguing and thought-provoking lecture. I've got on my son's baseball team someone who works for Facebook and AI, and I told him to come, but he couldn't come to this lecture. But in your scorecard, in the development of your scorecard, you use the example of kind of those stories. Can you maybe translate or use that scorecard for something mundane like the way we use Facebook, or Alexa, which is like the first word that if we hear in our house, Alexa snooze.
Yeah.
Alexa snooze, a couple of times.
Yeah.
I mean, can you use a scorecard for those? It's just like a translation for us.
Well, you've got multiple AIs that you're sort of using as examples. I mean, to focus on Facebook, and I'll go back to historical example because that's all in the record. And again, kind of pulling from what I was talking about in one of my classes today. If you kind of look at what happened in 2018 with the Cambridge Analytica scandal, that sort of revealed that this company had grabbed data, from Facebook, and then used it. The story goes to influence voters and maybe impacting Brexit or the presidential election in 2016. Facebook was not promoting. It wasn't promoting good political, social behavior and interaction, and it was criticized for that. It was not being responsible, and the way it was being used, the way the platform was being used as a weapon to sort of influence voters in particular, was an example of this is a technology that has become weaponized. Who cares what it was initially used for or the good thing it's done? This is what it's become. And so I think, it's pretty easy to go on that scorecard and say, this is a technology, and again, I'm focused on 2018. I'm not going to talk about metaverse stuff unless you ask me about that. But in 2018, it was clear this is a technology that had become a weapon, and it was being abused, and it was having bad social impacts. And so that would be an example of saying there needs to be multiple interventions, to address this. Legal interventions. That you'd want to see some reform within the corporation. You'd want to see some resistance from users. You'd kind of want to see saying, hey, this is not you're abusing our attention. You're abusing our agency. You're not augmenting our knowledge. You're sort of feeding us disinformation. So I mean, does that kind of help?
Well, I mean, is there an AI technology that on your scorecard would come out glowing or kind of with like hopeful that it's currently that we engage in and use?
Interesting question. I think I could probably rank. I kind of a ranked order of different technologies. Some companies. I think Microsoft does a very good job. With a lot of its ethical initiatives and sort of. The kind of care it expresses, the sort of care it gives its employees in training ethics. So there's a lot of things going on, with Microsoft applications where I would give it a higher rating than, say, Facebook. There are, but again, it's complicated. You're talking about instances of AI and different systems and often, going back to the factory example, you have a hybrid system of sort of, all these different systems thrown together. So you really have to kind of peel it apart. You can look at it comprehensively, but then you start to say, well, this part, needs to respect users' rights more, or this part needs to, give people input in terms and be more transparent about what it's doing with their data or how the algorithms are, going to influence them. So yeah, I can't think of an AI instance that passes, that passes all the, sort of passes all the questions well. But there are ones that I think do a better job of sort of attending to how these systems impact us in different ways. Yeah, Eric.
Thank you, Michael, for your talk.
Yeah.
I think that my brain is going to be working for at least a week just to process all that you've said. Now I want to read all the things that you read, and I think I should have read like half of them, right? Of the books that you used for this. My question is detonated by something that Brian asked. You were saying pushback from the users, right? So part should be regulation from some form from the state or society, but also the users should push back and say, no, this is not convenient. So my question is, how would you scaffold educating users so that they have the tools? Because a person who doesn't know what's happening is just going to have Facebook, Instagram, and everything, and then they're going to go and be automata of social network. So how would you scaffold that formation on the individuals?
It is a daunting challenge, and I think it's a whole society strategy that's needed because I think educators have a responsibility. I would argue from throughout all primary, secondary, tertiary institutions have a responsibility to create more literacy in students about data, about algorithms, about AI. And so users need to be educated. That's one part, and that's I think the responsibility primarily, or a primary responsibility of educational institutions. There's also the regulatory level, and that's where governments and people, citizens, should be advocating for changes at that level. There's corporate accountability through shareholders, through investors, through customers. I mean, it is really something that has to be dealt with. And there are outside advocacy groups. It really is a whole society problem. I mean, these technologies are still pretty new. These technologies are now part of our daily lives. And we have a society, many parts of which are structured with for a different technology stack. And so we're all playing catch up at different levels. So everyone's on board. Yeah. Okay.
Bring this to an end or we won't get to the cupcakes.
Okay. Yes, cupcakes. You've earned the cupcakes.
Please join me again in thanking. And our 2020, I guess, leader lecture recipients, Michael receives a medallion. It's a great one, and there's an honorarium that will be coming as well. And so thank you so much, Michael, for adding to that wonderful depository of lectures that you can all probably point us to where those are, I'm sure. And thank you so much for